to save time, in this website, there's also a good description of all the participants. I propose not reading it. Let's make it brief. Beginning from Pille. She will say who she is, where she works, and what is her connection to domestic abuse, and she'll tell us a story about abuse that ended in a positive way. Hello, everybody. My name is Pille Tsopp-Pagan, head of NGO Women's Support and Information Center. We are the oldest women's asylum in Estonia, and now also one of the strongest support centers from women. I'm connected to this topic because it seems to be my mission, and I know how to help these people who cannot stand up for themselves. And if you're passionate about something, then you must do it because you must use your energy. We have different stories. One of those is the following. There was a violent relationship. A woman got out of it with children. The woman moved to another city. And once woman filed in the alimony claim, and the man came after her and started to stalk her and threaten her. And make his claims that the woman withdraw the report, otherwise she would face consequences. And our lawyers managed to get fast a restraining order. We handed this case to Maroc. This was discussed. It was decided that it's a difficult situation. And police came to help. Everybody understood it's a dangerous case. It's a case where you must cooperate. We had the police, the prosecutor's office, judges, the government and support center. We, as the center, usually stand aside the woman. So that was a nice story. I think that 10 years ago, it wouldn't have been possible to get a solution in that fast way. So in cooperation, yes.
Roman, kes sa oled, mis on sinu lugu?
Roman, who are you and what is your story? Hello, everybody. Everybody here in this audience, and hello also to people behind computers. My name is Roman Krõlov. I work as a counselor in support line, and I'm a victim support counselor. I've been working with victims in different contexts. I work with the victims of human trafficking, domestic violence, human trafficking, and I give help to some victims. About 5 or 6 years ago, I started to understand that if we want to stop violence, then the perpetrator must change his behavior. This is the most valuable outcome you can get. And when I was proposed to participate in the project of a support line of giving up violence, then I accepted it. And, for the last 13 years, I've been a part of this team. Right now, I'm helping men and women who have been violent. I help them to become more peaceful and give up violence. Do you have some good stories? Yes. During the last year, we've had more than 1,000 contacts with offenders, and there are lots of success stories there. One of them is about a man.
kes oli uimastimüüja,
He was a
kes terve oma elu
drug
kasutas rusikaid,
trafficker.
lahendada erinevaid probleeme.
He had been using violence to solve problems all his life, basically.
Konflikte, vastikused konfliktid oma naissõbrannaga.
He had conflicts with his girlfriend.
Pärast mitmekordset nõustamist
And after many sessions of counseling, the man called me one evening and he told me
temal oli tüli,
that he had a fight with his girlfriend.
Mees leidis jõudu enda sees,
but the man had force, that the man found strength in himself and avoided using violence. He just decided to walk away and didn't use violence. If I hear something like that, this makes me feel really good. I'm very happy. Hello, I'm Kaspar Oja. I'm a prosecutor. And I've been dealing with domestic violence from 2018. There are some people here who have been dealing with it for as long as I've been living, of course. But yes, this has been my area. If you ask me for my story, I recommend everybody to read the Estonian newspaper Eesti Ekspress, today's edition. There's a good story, an example of good criminal proceeding about sexual assault. There's a victim, and the assault was committed 10 years ago, so it was almost expired case. I'll just describe it a bit. And the victim got great support from the state, from therapists and psychologists, some counseling to turn to the police. Once she turned to the police, then police and prosecutor's office started to deal with it fast because it was almost expired. Then once it reached the court, then the victim also got a supporter. Then the court sessions, they also took care to make the sessions as easy to the victim as possible. So they put up walls so that the victim and the perpetrator wouldn't have to meet. And it reached the national court in the end, and the man was convicted in rape. And it was word against word, as it often happens, that the man says one thing and the woman says exactly the other. But it's that you can find an outcome there, even though it was an old case, it was still possible to get a verdict there. I'm not sure if this meets your criteria of a great story, but it's like a story where you see the light at the end of the tunnel. And we've had cases like that recently. Other cases like that. My name is Joosep, Kaasik. I'm a prefect of the Northern Prefecture. Training policemen and drawing up instructive materials started about 15 years ago. We started it with Kati, in different projects. And you wouldn't have guessed it would get that far and develop so well. But some examples of good cooperation, one of them, this networking once helped to solve a problem and solve it fast.
sai sellest vägivallaringist välja.
The victim got out from the circle of violence. It didn't have put a complete end to the sufferings, but still most of it. It was a small young family, a pregnant woman,
kelle juures erinevate tülide tõttu tuli politseil käia umbes kord kuus.
And police had to visit her about once a month because of different quarrels. It was possible to sue the offender, but what happened that the man had to go to a municipality, to a local government, and then they organized the escape of the woman to a women's support center. Because the man couldn't be persecuted in a court, but the woman could be helped. Why did I start this conversation with this question? I've been a journalist for 25 years and I've also been a criminal reporter most of the time. And I got an impression yesterday that things are really bad. These things are working, other things aren't working, these people aren't empathic as much as they should, and so on. I started in 1991 to work here. And then it's always important to me to emphasize where we come from. Estonian Republic just turned 30. I'm glad to emphasize some numbers that I always carry with myself. I show them in Georgia and Moldova, and these numbers are photographed by people, and they ask me, how is it possible? We started off at the same time, and how is it possible that you've reached so far in Estonia? Numbers are like that. In 1994, in Estonia, more than 3,600 homicides were carried out. Then there were 23 killings. In a few years later. Also the number of victims of fire accidents, 135 in 1 year, and a few years later, just 43. 360 people victims of traffic accidents in 94, and a few years later, just 250. And also the trustworthiness of police grew very much. This doesn't belittle the sufferers of any single victim. It's still that these people have tragic stories. But coming back to today, it's that when in 2010 domestic violence started to become very topical, and the prosecutor office started to have much more reports of domestic violence. There was a big surge. Now looking at the last 10 years, can you see that there's been big progress in terms of domestic violence? That not only that more reports are carried out, but that more people also get help.
Definitely. I have to repeat what Karin Talviste said, the state prosecutor. So she gave the statistics, and there you could see very specific milestones. The case you all heard of is, for example, we have this woman who is at work, and her ex-husband just comes there, just stands there and goes away. The woman goes home, but her phone is ringing throughout the evening. When she opens her mailbox, there are 10 emails there. This might be 1,000 times more painful than physical violence. Stalking is horrible. One of such victims told me that she separated from this man 5 or 6 years ago, but every time the phone rings, she thinks it might be him. So
see ei olnud isegi väärtegu, rääkimata sellest, et
5 years ago, stalking wasn't even a misdemeanor.
tsiviilkohtus
Not speaking of a criminal offense, you couldn't even take it to the civil court.
meeletult ahistatakse.
Somebody is stalking me, please help me. Somebody is harassing me. No, this wasn't a crime here in Estonia. In the United States, in Germany, it was a crime. However, in 2017, it was criminalized. And all of a sudden, we have thousands of people who before heard from the state, we can't do anything. They used to go to the police and the police was forced to say, we can't help you in any way. We can have a conversation with this person, but we cannot use our force here. We can't do anything. And this was only 4 years ago. So it's a very specific example. So now we made a huge leap forward, and now we can help thousands of people. Will these people go to jail as well? They will. There are people in prison right now. There are people in prison who have never been violent, physically violent, I mean, whose violence is expressed by constant oppression and stalking. What do you think? Roman and Pille, from your perspective, do men or do women trust you more? I am somewhat critical. I do remind you that the police receives about 40 phone calls every day related to domestic violence. This means that domestic violence is a problem in Estonia. During the past 10 years, of course, we have progressed a lot. Right now, I think that our system is victim-based. So that means that if somebody comes to the police or the prosecutor's office or the child protection services and says that, okay, I am a victim, then nobody starts to laugh, but they will deal with the problem, and they will really deal with the problem. On the other hand, we have a question whether one body is too much, and I think it is. So we have made a huge leap, but we also need to take further steps to address this problem. Indeed, I do agree. Of course, we have made progress, and the progress we made in 2017 was related to the final ratification of the Istanbul Convention, so that helped us change several clauses in legislation, and luckily in Estonia we do enforce our law. Is it safer for women? Well, when we look at the big picture, everything is, getting better. When we look at it in the European context, Estonia is a success story. We have the victim support organization that's dealing only with this topic, so this is a big thing. We are developing this topic in a structured manner, but when I look at the women that come to the support center, then every single woman whose problem is not going to be solved, and sometimes their troubles can't be solved, then they are just one number in the statistics. But nobody wants to be the statistics. They are just a person who hasn't received help from the state. But everybody wants to receive help. So yes, the big picture is good. Things are looking upwards, but we do have problematic cases. We do have abusers. In my shelter, I also have young women whom I've safeguarded for 5 years, 8 years, who still receives 60 threatening messages a day. And the police just tells them, the man is a jerk, just deal with it.
Joosep, sina oled olnud lähisuhtevägivalla temaatikaga politseis seotud juba tegelikult.
You have been working with this topic for a long time in the police. I also knew some police officers who thought that, the woman's place is in the kitchen. You have received an award from the Estonian Women's Association. And this was before 2010. So your history with this topic is longer. So what's your perspective? Have we had progress in the attitudes? Of course, things have improved. When we started, it was more than 10 years ago. It was almost 20 years ago. Then, we were speaking about, very basic issues, whether anybody else should get involved besides from the police. And then we had the NGOs who dealt with this topic. So the state used to say, this is your personal matter, go to court. And when, of course, the police officers also used to say that, this is a nuisance, this is, very tedious work. You have to go to the one and the same place again and again. The woman doesn't cooperate. And of course, she's to blame in the end. So luckily, this attitude has changed. But it hasn't been easy. We have made a lot of effort. I think our first protocol was finalized in 2007 in cooperation with many agencies. And of course, the protocol itself is not enough. People have to follow it as well. So it has been a long process. What I can say is that when I speak to people, but of course I'm the big boss, maybe they don't dare tell me, but I haven't heard anybody saying that, this is not something that the police should deal with. But I would like to tell my colleagues that, we shouldn't get stuck to the idea that we can only solve domestic violence problems by using a criminal justice system. Life has shown us that the abusers, once they have served their sentence, they come out and it starts from scratch. From all over, the same thing will go on over and over again. The fact that we go and visit a family once a month isn't nice for everybody. We would like to somehow find a solution, but often we get stuck in the criminal justice issues. So, yes, my hypothesis is that, this thing can be solved only then when all parties involved contribute wholeheartedly. Otherwise, it will be an unfinished process. Who isn't contributing then? No one is. I mean, the police isn't either. We have had these wonderful pilot programs here. We do risk assessment. We think about what to do with specific people. This is great, but I think that, for example, the local governments should do a lot more. The Social Security Board definitely has room for development, although they have developed a lot. The Women's Shelter Network could be better so that we could remove victims from situations as quickly as possible. But once again, it only works when everybody cooperates. If the police does its part, but nobody else does anything, it doesn't work. Wonderful. We have a question from the floor. If there is something that you could do here in Estonia to change something in the fight against domestic violence, what would it be? Roman, can you start, please?
Spetsialistide kogukonna arendamine.
Developing the community of specialists. We need more specialists working with abusers, for instance. We have some of them, but we need more of them. We also need to develop our community culture. How do we tackle a problem? We need to change the general culture in the society
näiteks eitama.
So that the people who commit violent acts won't deny their actions, but see it as a problem and seek for help. This means that we should develop the culture of the community of specialists and the society as well. Kaspar.
Ma sellele kirjutan kindlasti alla, sest et
Yes, I do agree with it 100%. I work in Tallinn. I see what kind of resources people have in Tallinn. But when we go, I don't know, 100 kilometers away from Tallinn, things are different. We need to have services in both languages. So the lack of resources shows. But I do have an idea of my own as well. So I think that it's very important to train judges. When I mentioned this article in the newspaper Eesti Express before, then we saw that the number of people that the victim has to contact is huge, psychologists, prosecutors, judges, and we have to keep in mind it's not a regular victim. And in Estonia, judges deal with all sorts of cases. A judge might, one day deal with a huge corruption scandal. Next day, they have to support the victim in a domestic violence case. So I know that there are trainings, but it should be a priority. Pille. The abuser should be given their responsibility. The abuser has to take their responsibility. Then they can go and look for help. This responsibility has to be demanded by the society and by everybody who work with him. Right now, the abuser tends to think that, I do it because I can. Also, constant mental violence has to become a part of our criminal justice system. The judges need to accept that as well. Right now, we don't know how to use or how to work with it. We need to train all specialists regarding that. Also, the specialists who deal with custody rights, they also have to know how persistent mental violence affects the child. You can't send the child to the abuser if everybody around them know that the child is actually a tool. When I heard these stories yesterday, I started to think about, what to do with them. I tend to see myself as a normal guy, I'm ready to forgive a person who has committed a crime once. Maybe they get help from a program of some kind. I remember doing stories of men who went to different sorts of group programs. But I will give you a parallel. Joosep knows this thing. When the police started to publish the names of drunk drivers every morning, you can't imagine what happened. People called us every morning and asked me, can you please do something? Can you please get my name off this list? This public shame was unbelievable. Then our level of humanity reached to the point where, we passed the data protection law, and this thing ended. So it lasted for a couple of years. Here today, we dare present the American specialists and say that, they are doing good work there. But in the US, there are court systems who give out a punishment such as standing on a freeway wearing a sign, I beat my wife.
et siis vanglas salvestatud telefonikõned.
Yesterday when we had these phone calls recorded in prison,
ma ei pane kedagi tanki, mul endal tekkis sama küsimus, mis oli seal selles äpis.
And I had this question, hey, but how can it be? Because we have the Data Protection Act. How can you record such phone calls? This idea of data protection, we have internalized it. It comes so naturally to us. So when I was training government officials for years and years, then they always told me that, they can't give a proper interview because the journalists want to know details, the name, the address, the moon phase, whatnot. I said, no.
Oma vaenlastele, partneritele, riigiametnikele läbi loo, kus ei ole.
The journalists want to tell a story without personal details, but you have to tell these stories. You have to emphasize these stories, not think about what will happen. Joosep, you wanted to add something? Yes, when you asked what is one thing that disturbing or what should be changed, it's the data protection thing. For me, it's absurd. Why is it absurd? Because, we were dealing with the same topic when we started a long time ago, where from the victim's point of view, when a person approaches the state, she gives her consent for the state to help her. And then we reach a point when we have to ask her, can we use your data? Can we redirect you? Probably when you turn to the state, you wanted to be helped. And I think this consent is enough so that the state and local governments could intervene and could solve the problem. It's not that I have to go and get all sorts of consents. Of course, if a person is in such a state, all sorts of consent forms fend her off. They are not encouraging. And then another thing I agree with, it's very important to tell these stories. Of course, there are certain legal nuances, but it sends the signal to those that commit crimes that, the same thing could happen to you if you tell this story.
Ja täisnimega iga jumala kord lehte.
If pedophiles would get put into newspaper with their name and face every time they committed a crime, what if? It sometimes also happened that a person privately makes a webpage about a person convicted in pedophilia. But there's a nuance. That in domestic violence, we can shame this man, but automatically everybody, all the family members, all the close people will find out. Then the family will say, then the woman must have been the victim. As Pille said earlier, before we start to shame these men, we need to get to a state in the society where the victim would never feel ashamed, only the man would feel ashamed. Sass Henna, Estonian writer, has said the same. It's good. It would be great if the victim never felt ashamed seeing her husband's ex-partner's picture somewhere. Ashamed wouldn't make her have any bad feelings. That would be ideal. But in the case of these pedophiles, the friends, family saw him with some children. What if, and I feel it, that there's a mentality, the person who hits a woman is a jerk, a loser, he's weak, he's afraid. I think this image should get amplified. I think that
igaüks omab õigust suhtuda nagu ta tahab.
I think this labeling is not good.
Meie tavaliselt, et vältima kleppima erinevad sildid.
Although we sometimes do it in our work as well, but we try to be respectful towards these men and women who contact our services. I think it's a great value if they come to counseling in order to change their behavior safer.
Ja muidugi need inimesed panid toime
Of course, these are people who, among whom many committed serious violence. But for us, it's a big value that they want to change their behavior, and this gives us a chance. Of course, we also want to help the victim. We need to retain this focus on supporting the victim, and we only work towards guaranteeing safety for the victim. But it's your work to support them. It's very specific. My work, well, it's that people who feel they'd like to get help come to you. But there are many who don't want to get help. And to put pressure on them, we speak about the victim and helping him. The perpetrator somewhere hidden somewhere in the dark. But if the society changes its opinion about domestic violence, it's not that tango is that you need two to tango, but it's actually a power relationship. And an idea I've been trying to sell to the police is that in the morning at the radio it said that there were so many drunk drivers, so many accidents. Then you could also say there were so many family violence incidents, police called out. Then this would reach or get us more. We would understand it more, we would know the statistics. But no person don't know this about these statistics. But if you hear 20 reports of family violence, then there's the Midsummer Night's Eve and 60 or 70 cases, then it has an impact. I like this idea. I think Joosep will take it also to his department that it will be implemented. But we had the Norwegian example that they make efforts to change the men and reduce violence. I remember hearing of the program 7 years ago, had men meeting the men, and we were broadcasting it, and these men were telling why they joined the program and why they recommend it. I haven't seen any programs like that later. Don't we have any men or something else? Oh, perhaps we don't have these journalists who to speak about this. I would like to see these men who want to inspire others to search for solutions. Estonia is small. If you're labeled, then if you get this bad connotation, then it's bad for you. I remember a case of a female client who wasn't able to get a job after her story had been reported in the newspaper of her hitting her daughter. The newspaper had also disclosed her delicate personal data, her name, and she had been fired and she couldn't find a new job. It's not a good thing. Who won from it? The daughter or the woman? Nobody won. I think it's an easy and revolutionary option, but perhaps it's not the best solution. I dare to say and praise journalists here that in general they do great work also in cooperation with other entities and institutions about retaining the anonymity of the parties. If the men could tell their stories, I feel guilty, this is my story, I recommend the program to everybody, and if they could remain anonymous as well, yes, it would help.
vähemalt 2
Well,
oli avaldatud
there were 2 of them,
meedias
and on media, and our department was dealing with it. Are there men who would like to come? Does anybody know? Are there some round tables in Estonia? Yes, we do have. We have many groups, different NGOs. I see Karin's impression on her face. We actually sometimes even have the problem that there are no vacancies in this group. This is great news, absolutely. So we do have these groups for these abusers. And there are more of them coming up. We don't have a problem here. I cannot say, however, why the media hasn't been writing about these groups. But I agree 100%. It's good to speak about them. Everybody knows what is anonymous alcoholics. Has anybody heard of groups for abusers? No. AA is, I go there for 12 years. I feel, and this group for abusers should also have this long-term effect. But for the abusers, it's just 13 sessions and then it's it. But we're speaking about making it more long-term, that you can go back if you start to fall back into the circle of violence. That would be great, and if abusers could use these long-term projects. A question. Now, question leading us to our next topic. I ask all of you to choose one from your networks and with whom you need to improve the cooperation with, and why is it important? Could I begin? Child protection departments of municipalities, we would need to improve cooperation with them. And these municipalities need more support actually, because they are between 2 fires. But this is the most critical point from this area. Most critical. Roman, Kaspar? If you allow, I'll actually use a metaphor. I have a prop here, and I really like this metaphor. It's an umbrella. Here you have these lines or sections, and these are like different professions: course, prosecutor, police, medical workers, victim support, local municipality, support line for giving up violence. But there's a textile between these parts, and this is our cooperation. And without this cooperation, the umbrella wouldn't work. Try going to the street if you don't have this textile here in between, and see what will happen to you. So yesterday, Airi Mittendorf said that family violence is varied, and we need to have also a diverse solution. I agree with Joosep that we must really work to simplify the cooperation between different departments and institutions. We must know what we do, why we do, how we do it. We must have a joint understanding about abuse, about who's the victim, who's the perpetrator, and what will we do about it. And speaking about whom we need to cooperate with in this helpline. I think it's the medical workers, psychiatrists. We need them immensely, and I hope they'll come to help us.
No nii, Roman vastas, Pille.
Pille?
Ma juba vastasin.
I already answered.
Jaa, ma olen lihtsalt Romaniga nõus ja sellel oli
I just agree with Roman.
Enne Scott rääkis, see on coordinated community response.
Scott mentioned it's the coordinated community response.
Meil on koostöö,
Don't we have
meil ei ole
that?
selles mõttes, et täpselt kokku lepitud, täpselt
We have kind of something like that, but it's not that we have joint rules. Of course we do cooperate.
Teel õhtul kella 5-ni.
Ei ole.
It's not that you communicate until 5 o'clock by letters. No, our women can call to prosecutors and call them at 11 at night and say that they have a critical situation. So we do have that capacity, but it's based on people's free will. If Joosep goes away, then I'm in trouble. I agree. It's very much person-based. If I go to some colleague, I need some contact person in this asylum or in this union of asylums, then my colleague will probably know somebody, and if I lose that contact, then it's a problem for me. So everybody have their notebooks where they have this one person from one institution that they know, and if they lose that contact, then they are a bit in trouble. So that's a value.
Yes, I would like to add that I do agree with everybody. But if I had to bring out one thing, then the issue is the local municipalities, the availability of services. We do have the victim support service, all sorts of support services. But if we don't have psychologists, psychiatrists, then these support services don't help. So this is what's lacking in Estonia. We need these services if we want to help people. And not all municipalities have similar capabilities. So things that are available in Tallinn aren't available elsewhere. The cooperation between people, the interpersonal cooperation is great, but it doesn't really help if the partner of this local municipality has nothing to offer. Speaking about cooperation, when I think back to Scott Miller, you could have, instead of Scott Miller, you should have asked here the head of Viljandi Hospital. They have this thing called the Project Bike there. It's a pilot project, and the aim of the project is creating this umbrella. For example, my dad was 63 years old and he died. Why did he die? Well, he was a typical Estonian man. He lied to his wife that, he had had different sorts of procedures. He had been examined. He couldn't phone his family doctor, so he lied about getting his medication. So in the Viljandi hospital, they have a manager who approaches the person who has heart problems. And there's this team working with this person. So this support circle includes his wife, his massage therapist, his physiotherapist, his doctor. So and everything is in one and single file. Because the problem is that, as long as the person is at hospital, it's good. But when they get out of hospital, they will start dying again because, they can't be bothered to, tell about their problems or get their medication. Why couldn't we implement such an approach in the domestic violence cases? Indeed. I mean, when we read about cases where things have gone wrong, the problem is that the information doesn't move. So somebody has a piece of information, but it doesn't move.
aga selles mõttes see probleem, et on vaja need inimesed kuidagi kokku saada.
So we need to kind of, get the information moving. I would like to say that we do have something similar today here in Estonia, maybe not all over Estonia, but the similar pilot projects are being carried out. For example, the risk assessment system of high-risk abusers. People come together and, divide their tasks. So everybody's in the same room. Yes, they have agreed on how to exchange information. The tasks have been delegated, and then they come together and discuss things. So this is the direction. But your example of the Viljandi hospital was great. If you have all these people and if they have time to deal with this patient. Because if you have some service missing from this picture, it doesn't work. This is the problem. Actually, before Marak, we need something else. Marak groups have justified themselves and they have prevented fatal cases. We can see today, maybe on a smaller scale, but still, before getting to Marak, there is some sort of discussion about how to deal with a specific case. But I do agree that it's based on personal contacts. It's not a formal process. Yes, in Tartu, we have a round table regarding the violence against the elderly. A big problem that has come out is that, the information isn't moving between different agencies. For example, the local government might say that, but we didn't know that there was a restraint order. They can't help, although they would like to help. The next question. Why doesn't our law state that a child who has witnessed domestic violence is a victim? Yes, well, in our penal code, we have stated that a victim is somebody who has suffered harm. So this is why. But always we have to ask what changed if we gave the status of victim to the child. This is a legal definition. It doesn't matter whether they are the victim or a witness. If they need help, we should give them help. I'm not sure that amending legal acts is the way to go. If they have witnessed violence, then, for example, if you witness something in the street, then maybe it's good if somebody gave you some sort of support. So you need some sort of counseling, psychological support. I don't think that we need to amend our legislation. I have a piece of information. So on the 8th of October, we have a web conference where fathers who have completed this program for abusers will tell their stories. There will be more information about the conference available soon. Okay, what else? Why don't we have a sexual offender register which would help us protect others? Yes. I agree with the question. Yes, I think it's the same arguments are valid here. The state publication, Riigi Teataja, is public. I understand this concern. I have had to speak to a victim who had known the perpetrator for a short time. And I asked her, do you know that this person has done time for this and this kind of offense? In the article in the newspaper Eesti Express, we could read that, employer of this rapist found out that, he was a rapist from the article, but was still working as a coach. So he was fired, of course. So I understand the concern. But if we do have this public list, I don't know whether people will Google their partners or what will happen. I do agree that the information gets stuck. Since we have 4 minutes and 13 seconds to go, let's have the last question. So I have a wonderful question, the final question to you. So what do you think? How will the situation regarding the domestic violence in Estonia change in 10 years' time? So, and, what else will you be doing in this field after our conference? Oh, there were several questions here. So briefly, what can you do tomorrow? What can you do differently tomorrow because of this conference, so that something would change in 10 years' time? I think that here in our panel discussion agreed on the fact that tomorrow there will be domestic violence statistics, yes, in the radio at 8 o'clock in the morning. Yes, that we will train our specialists, our community. We will give them more information, and also we will do our best to simplify interagency cooperation when we deal with domestic violence cases. I do feel that when we carry out all these activities, it will be great. My dream is that, well, this is something I've worked for 6 years. My dream is this coordinated community response. I want this to be implemented in every village, in every community. And there should be one person dealing with the victim, her support person, so that she wouldn't have to tell her story multiple times. And then I think that's it. I will continue working for it. Did you get something useful out of this conference? Something that you will start doing tomorrow? I got a lot of messages. Since my work is about, communicating messages, I did write down many of them. Yes, this coordinated community response, and also the question of exchange of information. It could be organized in a more reasonable manner. Maybe we should readdress this problem so that we would actually get somewhere. Maybe we will find a way of doing it. And another important topic here that we didn't tackle here is working with our people who deal with domestic violence cases. So this is something that, we haven't dealt with at all. We don't have a support network for these people who work with abusers, who would help to keep them sane. One thing I will take with me is something that we have. I think it was the last presentation yesterday, our American colleague who said that when the victim recants, then what to do with it in court. And she spoke about how we could use these emergency calls and these videos. And it helps us explain to the court that, it's normal that people recant. If you give the victim a week or a month to think about things, they will recant. So this is something that I will send to my colleagues tomorrow. I am a young father. My son is 7, my twin girls are 5. I got this good recommendation. I think that was Airi who said that you have to teach your children to say no. And the second recommendation is that the next conference should be about prevention, and I'll be happy to help. Because having seen police officers, having worked with them for years, working with consequences is killing them as well. So let's try to prevent as much as possible. It's an easy thing to say, but I do think that this could be one opportunity. Pille, Roman, Joosep, Kaspar, thank you very much.